I want to cry. A little bit to evacuate the pressure. We did so many efforts with Pablo.
Bravo. C'est brillant. Ouais.
A few weeks before this explosion of joy, Antoine Carpentier and Pablo Santurce del Arco met in Le Havre at the beginning of November 2021 for the start of the 15th Transat Jacques Vabre race. They faced a record number of entries. 79 double-handed crews would race across the Atlantic and for the first time in the history of this legendary race would finish in Martinique. Over the last 28 years, the Transat Jacques Vabre race has become an unmissable event for the world's top sailors. Roland Jourdain, a double winner of the race, highlights the significance of what is the longest and most demanding double-handed offshore race.
The Transat Jacques Vabre is an essential part of the offshore racing landscape. I can't imagine being without this race, because it's biannual and has proved durable over time. It's a mark of excellence and a beacon for boat classes. It's a time marker on the circuit and the championship. It's essential for a whole system of sponsorship and long-term projects. So it's got to continue, or things just won't work.
The birthplace of the race is one of France's largest commercial ports, Le Havre, in Normandy. Sitting at the mouth of the River Seine, its mayor is Edouard Philippe. The city and JDE, France's major coffee company, co-founded the race and partnered with the Normandy region around the values of responsibility, performance, high standards and legacy.
I can't think of many examples of a city and company that have come together so well to create such a big and demanding event on a regular basis. It shows how proud the organizers are, and clearly pride makes things work.
The Docks District is the beating heart of the Transat Jacques Vabre and plays host to the fleet. A sporting arena on water, the docks are an ideal place for the public to get close to the action and dream in front of these 79 racing thoroughbreds. The docks are named after Le Havre's most famous sailor, Paul Vatine, who died in the race in 1999. There's loads for spectators to do at the race village, a real mix of entertainment, information and education. As well as meeting the sailors and their teams, there are conferences on the environment, like the decarbonisation of maritime transport or raceboat building. The race is known as the Route du Café, the coffee route, because it's always followed the historical maritime routes on which the prosperity of Le Havre was originally based. For the first time, the start and finish will take place on French soil, because the finish line is in Martinique, once the land of great coffee production. The classes all set off together from Le Havre, first heading out of the English Channel, then crossing the Bay of Biscay. They'll pass Cape Finisterre and head down to catch the trade winds. Then, south of the Canary Islands, the course divides into three and the fleet separates. The Class 40s follow the shortest route. They will have to round Cape Verde before heading to Martinique. The All teams follow the longest course. The waypoint they have to pass is off the coast of Rio. The Ocean 50s and the Imocas will follow similar routes towards Fernando de Noronha before all classes come together for the grandstand finish in Martinique. The 79 competitors are divided into 4 different classes of boat, and it promises to be an exceptional edition of the race. The largest fleet is the 12-metre monohull, the Class 40. They're the smallest boats in the fleet and designed to be accessible in terms of budget and easy to manage. 45 of them start the race. The boats that compete in the Vendée Globe race are also here. The 18-metre IMOCA class are designed for maximum speed. Thanks to their foils, most can also fly. There are two multi-hull categories. The Ocean 50, a 15-metre trimaran that's light, fast, and these days reliable too. And finally, the all-teams, 32-metre long trimarans that are 23 metres wide with masts of 37 metres. They're real flying beasts, reaching 80 kilometres an hour at top speed. Sunday morning, November 7, and the race boats slip their moorings for the Transat Jacques Vabre 2021.
We are in the Jacques Vabre vibe. There's a lot of people, the weather's great. It's just exceptional. We've worked for years, for months to be here, to live these moments. I love it.
For the 158 sailors and their families, it's time to hug and say goodbye. It's time to get down to business. For the Courtois, it's the start of an extraordinary adventure. The sisters won a competition set up by the Transat Jacques Vabre management to promote women in sailing. The pair are supported financially and practically by the organisers and race partner Saint-James.
We're impressed, and I'm a bit nervous, but now I've loaded the weather forecast and turned on the computer. I'm going to feel better. The guys are taking good care of our boat, and we'll concentrate on the routing. See you in Martinique.
With a nod to the ancient coffee route, the organisers have asked Stan Touré to carry a coffee plant to Martinique.
The coffee plant is named Gabi, in homage to Gabriel de Clieu, the navigator who took one to Martinique for the first time in 1721. And 300 years later, all the coffee plants that grow across South America come from that small coffee plant that left from Normandy. We're going to go and plant it with children in Martinique.
Everyone knows this is the last human contact until the end of the longest and toughest transatlantic challenge in ocean racing.
Les bonnes nouvelles, d'abord, c'est que le départ va être top.
The good news is that the start will be great. There will be winds, about 20 knots, so one tack to get to Étretat. Then it gets complicated because the wind drops.
En revanche, ça mollit tellement qu'il va se passer des choses qui sont incertaines. Il y a un système.
There's a system of anticyclones that's setting in, and this gives more of a Solitaire du Figaro atmosphere than a real transatlantic race.
L'habitude d'avoir du tonique à l'automne.
So we're going to have to be patient.
Il va falloir s'armer de patience.
Boris Diaw, the former captain of the French basketball team, interrupted a round-the-world sailing trip to be the starter of this 15th edition of the Transat.
It's a pleasure for me to come here and discover the world of racing. I love the outdoors and the ocean, and that's what I find in these sailors. I'll start the race when I'm told to, but I think everyone seems ready.
C'est moi qui donne le départ, je vais leur dire de partir quand on va me dire qu'il faut leur dire de partir. Mais bon, je pense que tout le monde a l'air prêt.
"15 to 20 knots of northwesterly wind and choppy seas as the 79 competitors enter the start sequence. It's time for final adjustments and strategy decisions to get through the traffic jam.
Regardez les tensions qui croient là.
Tu es d'accord pour moi ou... Pour moi, ouais.
Reprendre un peu de tweaker, tribord.
C'est pour ça qu'il y a de la mer aussi là.
Dans moins de 5 minutes, les concurrents seront en course. Ils devront être 2 à bord.
Allez, bon courage les gars.
race is beamed live across the world to 7 million viewers in 190 countries by 53 broadcasters, whilst 260,000 sailors start the esports version of the race on virtual regatta.
C'est un bon départ, clear start. Je passe l'AEHF à Boris Diaw. Boris Diaw, toute la flotte Transat Jacques Vabre. Départ de la 15e édition de la Transat Jacques Vabre, Normandie, Le Havre. Bon courage et bon vent à tous. Et rendez-vous en Martinique, à Port-de-France.
We're off on the Transat Jacques Vabre. There are people everywhere. Come on, guy, let's go. 20 days at sea. Let's go.
The sun broke through the clouds just in time, a magnificent view for the crowds massed on the white cliffs. The all teams show their power and in less than half an hour are rounding the turning mark at Etretat to head west. Maxi Edmond de Rothschild accelerates. Behind Camas and Caudrelier, Banque Populaire passes La Zatigue at the mark. But Actual and Sodebo are taking longer to get going. In the Ocean 50, Arkema is first at the mark, while the other 6 15-metre multi-hulls are riding the waves. In the Imoca class, Charlie Dallin lives up to expectations as the race favourite. The local boy flies his boat Apivia towards the mark.
That's cool. There are people along the cliff tops of Etretat, and there are people on the coast, so it's nice. It's beautiful.
Allez, maintenant c'est parti.
Anyway, here we go. About 15 days at sea.
In the Class 40s, Antoine Carpentier and Pablo Santurce del Arco's Redman is showing its speed by keeping up with the big Imocas. Also in the front charge, one of 3 all-female crews on La Boulangère Bio, Amélie Grassi and Marie Rioux. Everyone's strategy, it seems, is to make as much distance as quickly as possible before the incoming high-pressure zone forces them to move closer to the coastline. In the middle of the night, just as the wind died, the big sprinting trimarans reached the tip of Brittany. The currents here, between the Atlantic and the English Channel, are notorious. Stuck between Ushant and Molène, Maxi Edmond de Rothschild finds herself going backwards.
En fait, là, le vent est tombé graduellement et puis quand
the wind gradually dropped, and when we tried to pass Ushant, we stopped completely and started going backwards.
On a commencé à reculer, du coup, on a fait marche arrière. On était avec,
we were with SVR and Banque Populaire,
on est reparti en marche arrière.
So we tried to pass north of the island, and now we're trying to go around it, but we've stopped again.
Là, on est en train de contourner, mais là, on est à nouveau arrêté.
Contrairement aux idées reçues,
Contrary to popular belief, this is what the Bay of Biscay looks like in November. There's a friend to keep us company.
The lightness and manoeuvrability of the Ocean 50 allowed them to speed up more quickly and use every breath of wind. It also meant they suffered least in the erratic conditions. Xavier Maquet and Owen Leroux, the 3 times winner of the Transat, led the class in its attack on the all teams. However, the season's in-form boat, Leighton, had a few misfires early on.
We're happy to have a bit of wind. It's been a while since we've seen any. We're seeing a new friend too. We're a bit down at the start, but we're seeing accueillera again, who's just ahead. So that is cheering us up. Eating a bit and sleeping cheers us up too.
There was no chance of the Imokas foiling. For them, it was about not getting stuck in the dead zone.
There is no wind. Here we are with Fortinet Best Western. A top of the range foiler stuck to the water, nailed to the runway.
Not going backwards and escaping the dead zone was everyone's priority. Coram tried something to bypass Ushant before changing her mind and rejoining the pack alongside Linked Out, 11th Hour Racing Team and Chiral.
Hello everyone, welcome to Apivia in very calm condition on this Monday evening. The start of the race has gone well for us. We're very happy with our start and now we're heading south.
Devant le Havre et voilà, maintenant on fait cap vers le sud.
Hoping one day to find some wind.
In the Class 40 fleet, we'd been promised an ocean race with a coastal race feel. And that's what we got. Never has a transatlantic race been disputed so close to the coast. The fleet chased every puff, played with the tidal changes, and searched out the least strong currents, even if it meant skirting the coastline. The leaderboard ebbed and flowed with the spring tides. At the front were the experienced coastal racers. The Class 40s were caught in the high pressure zone with no prospect of escape. After such hard work, it was time for a first hot meal.
Table 64, please. My mouth is full. It's so tasty.
On cuisine, forcément, à bord du bateau Émile Henry à Pivot. On vous fait des bises, à plus!
Monday night, and some Class 40s are caught in the current, so have to use their anchors to avoid going backwards.
I'd like to make clear that what you're about to see may offend viewers of ocean racing shows.
Qui regarde une vidéo de course au large.
Tuesday morning, and the weather has improved for the all teams. They must take advantage and head down the Spanish coast as fast as possible. The aim? To pass Cape Finisterre and cross the ridge of high pressure that's blighted their progress.
Now we'll concentrate on passing Cap Finisterre, the only time there will be wind on this leg down the Atlantic.
For those further east in the Bay of Biscay, the wind picks up, launching a charge towards Cape Finisterre. A few hours later, Edmund de Rothschild flies past the tip of Spain, averaging nearly 27 knots. But she gets still faster, later that evening hitting 33 knots. Sedebo's hanging on. Thomas Coville is only 5 miles behind. Actual is 25 miles behind in third place. SVR Lazatigue struggled to keep up, paying the price for a series of time-costly jibes to get round Cape Ortega. Gabart and Lepêche were suddenly 35 miles behind. Meanwhile, Banque Populaire were paying for some poor route choices along the Brittany coast. Armel Leclerc and Kevin Escoffier had to watch their rivals pull away whilst they searched for wind. The Ocean 50 fleet were the stars of the first 48 hours. Thanks to their lightness and speed, they harassed their bigger, faster rivals, the All Teams, down the Spanish coast. The multi-hulls passed Cape Finisterre in the night, with Coesio, Solidaire de Peloton and Primonial all within 12 miles of each other. Behind them, though, the gaps were growing, with Leighton, Arkema and Group GCA sitting 60 miles further back. The multi-hulls passed Cape Finisterre in the night, with Coesio, Solidaire on Peloton and Primonial all within 12 miles of each other. Behind them, though, the gaps were growing, with Leighton, Arkema and Group GCA sitting 60 miles further back.
Petite sieste.
A little siesta because it's moving out there. We're in attack mode. With a panoramic view.
Off the tip of Brittany, the Class 40 fleet is still led by Alexis Loison on La Manche and Achille Nebu on La Motte. Speeds remain slow as the small monohulls struggle with the awkward high-pressure zone.
First time past Brittany for our little coffee plant, who's doing well. And for Monsieur Crépel, it's crossing number 3.
Number 3!
Some skippers, like former skier Ivica Kostelic, spend time removing seaweed from their boat. All teams spend Thursday the 11th of November rounding islands. First Madeira, then the Canaries, and the jibes are numerous as the fleet heads west. But Sedebo appears to be slowing down. More on that in a moment. By contrast, Maxi Edmond de Rothschild's speed is obvious as Frank Camas and Charles Caudrelier press the pedal and almost double their lead in 12 hours. By evening, they're over 95 miles ahead of SVR La Zatigue and 160 from Banque Populaire and Actual. Then comes confirmation that Sedebo has been in trouble for several hours.
Something hit the starboard foil hard. It was a violent impact. Tom flew through the boat. He's battered and bruised today. We are going to stop in Madeira to see if our technicians can put the foil back in a position where it doesn't damage the hull. We haven't thrown in the towel because we want to see if it's solvable first, and then, if the weather allows us, to rejoin the party.
Raisonnable de pouvoir envisager de revenir en trouble fête si effectivement la météo nous le permet.
After repairs by the shore team, who'd arrived on site in record time, Coville and Ruxel set off again at dawn, 500 miles behind Edmond de Rothschild, 200 miles behind fourth-placed Yves Le Blevec on Actual. The Imoca boats are making the most of the downwind conditions. The top 6 have increased their lead, but behind them the battle is raging between the older boats, some of which have smaller foils and are therefore not as fast. They're 180 miles from the front of the race, but are fighting at every cross. Amongst them, Yannick Bestaven, Damien Seguin, and Italian Giancarlo Pedote.
Look at Prismian Group in a great Portuguese breeze.
Un bellissimo Alisea portoghese. La barca fila veloce.
Boats fast.
E voilà. Un bellissimo giro
And look at the view.
E non ci resta che andare
We
avanti.
just have to keep going straight ahead. That way.
On the outskirts of Madeira, for the first time since leaving Le Havre, Thomas Rouillon on Linked Out and Jérémy Bayou on Charal managed to get into the lead when Apivia went too far east. Thursday at midday, the Class 40s finally reached Cape Finisterre. A group have decided to take a more western route, hoping to find breeze generated by the low pressure system that's approaching. Meanwhile, at the head of the fleet, the gaps are very small. Positions keep changing, and for the first time since Brittany, La Banque du Le Mans, Volvo and Eden Red pull into the lead. But only 18 miles separates the first 5 boats. More than 200 miles away, in 32nd position, the Courtois twins are smiling again.
We are reaching, and it's not undeserved because we've been becalmed since the Ras de Seine. We're struggling, we haven't slept, but now we're happier, and we are with our friends from Freedom who are just ahead of us.
In the all-team class, Maxi Edmond de Rothschild is best positioned and gets going as soon as the wind picks up. Camas and Caudrelier are out in front and grow their lead all the way to the doldrums.
Where are we? Over there in the northwest is Cape Verde. Right in front of us are the doldrums. And then there is Brazil, which is where we're heading.
Banque Populaire is fighting back. Armel Leclerc and Kevin Escoffier sailed the length of the Spanish and African coast before finally catching the leading group. SVR Lazartigue kept up a good pace before being left behind as they passed the tip of Spain in the only strong winds of the race. Thomas Coville and Thomas Ruxel are sailing with a damaged boat and are more than 1,200 miles behind leaders Maxi Edmond and Rothschild. Their focus, though, has changed from winning to finishing. In the 5 days to the Canary Islands, the Ocean 50 Coesio, sailed by a 3 times winner of the race, imposes its own rhythm on the rest of the fleet. Leroux chose to pass between the islands. His closest pursuers stayed in the west. It was a decision that saw Primonial come out in front. Coesio was left to skirt the African coast, joined by Leighton and Le Petit Doudou, before eventually turning west to rejoin the main group.
It's breakfast time on board Le Petit Doudou. I've taken out the couscous. As we're off the coast of Morocco, it's a seasonal dish. Soon, we'll be in the tropics.
Primonial has accelerated again and is up to 170 miles ahead of Cape Verde. Matthew Subin and Sebastian Rogue have lost almost nothing in the doldrums, and so after 11 days at sea, they're now at the Fernando de Noronha turning mark.
Hi everyone, welcome aboard the Primonial rocket. It's the express to Martinique. We passed Fernando de Noronha last night, and since then we've been attacking all the way down the no-go zone along the coast of Brazil. It's quite a challenge because we've got 25 knots of wind and we're rolling at an average of 24-26 knots.
The fleet then embarked on a jibing match along a no-go zone enforced by race management to avoid the busy fishing areas off northern Brazil. After a poor start to the race, Leighton are back in it. Sam Goodchild and Aymeric Le Chapelier, now third, are battling it out with Coesio, Solidaire en peloton and Le Petit Doudou. The Imoca Apivia, the big race favourite, had made the best of the light airs. She'd led the early stages around the tip of Brittany and past Cape Finisterre, but it's in the unstable Portuguese trade winds that Thomas Rouillon and Jeremy Bayo begin to claw the distance back from Apivia. On day 6, approaching the island of Madeira, Linked Out and Charal head west of the fleet. Apivia chooses to stay east for too long, and for the first time relinquishes the lead to her rivals.
So we meet again Charal. The Apivia-Charal duel continues at daybreak. The battle rages on, with Linked Out also not far away. It's a raging battle, isn't it? A real duel to the end. Yup, a bloody duel.
Linked Out led to the Canary Islands before the fleet split into two. The chasing group, made up of Initiative Kerr, Arkea Paprec and 11th Hour Racing Malamar, chooses to skirt the African coast and benefit from the thermal breezes created by the heat of the Mauritanian desert. Further west, the leading trio of Linked Out, Apivia and Charal are within 50 miles of each other. The crews are engaged in an intense game of cat and mouse.
Et bon dimanche à bord de Charal.
Happy Sunday on board Charal. Time for the Sunday roast.
Dominical.
Crossing the tricky doldrums changed nothing in the rankings, and soon the 60-footers were heading for a waypoint at Fernando de Noronha. Linked Out reaches the archipelago on the night of the 20th of November after 13 days at sea. Apivia is second, Charal third. These fast foilers have extended their lead and are now more than 300 miles ahead of Initiative Keur and accueillera in 4th and 5th. In the Class 40 boats, Alexis Loisan on La Manche and Luc Berry aboard La Motte spent the first week fighting it out for first place. It was only off the coast of Spain that the chasing pack caught up with the leaders. After 6 days at sea, on the 13th of November, off Gibraltar, Antoine Carpentier's Redman moved into the lead for the first time.
Hello everyone, welcome to Redman. We've had a crazy 48 hours, but we've regained the lead, so we are very happy.
Just behind, Banque du Le Mans, Volvo and Eden Red were waiting to pounce as they skirted the African coast. The Canary Islands split the fleet, but Redman stayed in front, leading down to Cape Verde, where they turned for the long crossing to Martinique.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Cape Verde Islands, which means we're halfway into the race.
Les Canaries, c'est bon?
The Canaries, that's great. Cape Verde next, with Cesaria Evora. We are coming. We're already barefoot.
Meanwhile, in the Martinique capital, preparations for the finish are complete, despite the difficult conditions created by the pandemic. The arrival pontoon was ready to welcome the first of the 77 competitors still racing.
We are delighted to be able to meet up again, even though we're socially distanced. We are all looking forward to welcoming the boats to this magnificent setting in the Baie of Fort-de-France. It's one of the most beautiful bays in the world.
Attention pour l'arrivée de Primonial. Top arrivée de Primonial.
On Monday, the 22nd of November at 9 p.m, Sébastien Rogue and Mathieu Souban crossed the finish line of the 15th edition of the Transat Jacques Vabre in first place, winning the Ocean 50 class. Primonial took 15 days, 13 hours, 27 minutes and 14 seconds and covered just over 6,536 miles at an average speed of 17.5 knots. The winning skippers were overjoyed.
Very nice victory, nice sailing. They have a perfect knowledge of the boat. There was a very clever weather move in the Canaries where they shifted to the west, and that eventually gave them the lead. But taking the lead is one thing, keeping it is another. They sail magnificent.
C'est vraiment donné sans rien garder, quoi. Enfin,
we really gave it our all and didn't hold anything back. We gave everything we had and it paid off, more than paid off. Spending 15 days on the boat with Matt was great.
Avoir passé 15 jours avec Matt sur le bateau, ça a été un gros kiff. C'était super.
Over the next 4 hours through the Martinique night, Coesio and Leighton completed the podium.
Rien lâché. On a animé cette course, je crois que c'était...
We didn't give up. We shook up this race and got people talking. We played our part, so it was really cool.
Donc c'était vraiment cool, quoi.
Leighton!
Third place isn't bad, and it was a great transat. We got off on a bad foot probably the first 12 hours, and we kind of dragged that deficit through the rest of the race. But really happy to come back to third and gain some places going through the doldrums and get back onto the podium. And now we're tired and looking forward to some sleep.
To further spice up the finish, the Diamond Rock Trophy was awarded in a time trial on the last stretch of the race between the famous landmark Diamond Rock and the finish line. Thibaut Vauchel-Camus and Fred Dutil on Solidaire en Peloton proved fastest, taking 53 minutes, 1 minute faster than second-placed Armel Tripon and Benoît Marie on Les Petits Doudous. For the all teams, the final sprint was just as breathtaking. Maxi Edmond de Rothschild was slowed right down in a windless zone off Barbados. The others closed in, but just in time the breeze returned and she crossed the finish line on Tuesday the 23rd.
Attention pour l'arrivée de Edmond de Rothschild, premier de la catégorie ultra. Top, arrivée de Edmond de Rothschild, numéro 17, bravo.
Frank Camas and Charles Caudrelier took 16 days, 1 hour, 49 minutes and 16 seconds to cover just over 9,262 miles, averaging 24.01 knots. The pair were race leaders for 98% of the time.
La logique a pris dessus le...
Logic won it. They were favorite, and once they had the lead, their perfect knowledge of the boat, perfect teamwork won through. Franck and Charles ticked all the boxes.
Charles, parfait travail d'équipe, enfin bon, toutes les cases sont cochées.
This will be remembered as a great race. It was the longest Jacques Vabre I've ever done. Same for Charles. 17 days of racing, 7,500 miles. It's a very long race, so we are delighted to have arrived with a boat that's 100% and above all in front.
Behind them, the next few hours were intense, and SVR L'Azétique did not give up, managing to steal second place from Banque Populaire on the last few tacks.
There's a great winner up front, and behind us they also fought hard. What happened in the last 48 hours with Banque Pop was just great. We had a blast, and we were super happy.
La deuxième place, c'est quasiment une victoire pour François Gavard et Tom Laperche.
On aurait bien aimé garder cette deuxième place qu'on avait chaudement conservée pendant.
We would have liked to hold on to second place, which was ours for much of the race, but in the end, there are a lot of positives to come from this. I'm on the podium with Kevin, with a boat that is in good shape, so all good.
Kevin et un bateau qui est bien en forme aussi, donc tant mieux.
T'as repris du gras, toi, par se mettre au vélo. Merci beaucoup.
On their damaged trimaran, Thomas Coville and Thomas Rouxel reached Martinique 3 days behind the winners. For Coville, who'd previously already won the Transat, completing this edition was important to him.
On devrait faire ça avec les organisateurs. Le mec, il devrait avoir...
The organizers should give everyone a finisher's t-shirt like they do in ultra running. The attention is all on Franck and Charles because they won, and that's right. That's why we do it. They're unique because there can only be one winner, but the others have also had to dig deep. They are the finishers.
Et ils sont finishers.
François Gabin and Tom Laperche won the all-team time trial to take the Diamond Trophy in 59 minutes. That was 3 minutes better than Yves Le Blevec and Anthony Marchand on Actual. While the pontoons were filling up with multi-hulls, the monohulls were still racing. In the stifling heat, the IMOCA boats continued their close racing up the coast of South America. The trade winds, though, were not stable and restricted the sailors' strategy options as they followed the course along the no-go area of Brazil. At the front, Thomas Rouillant and Morgan Lagraviere found some extra acceleration thanks to their good downwind speed. It made all the difference. Linked Out was more than 150 miles ahead of Charlie Dallin and Paul May at Sapivia, who were definitely off the pace in those conditions. Charal sat third. The ranking seemed to have been frozen.
There's a little less than 2 days to the finish, scheduled for the morning of the 25th. You can see the trade winds are a little weak and erratic. They vary between 10 and 14 knots. It's not huge, but we should find a little more pressure this evening up to the finish.
Thursday, 25th of November, after 18 days at sea, Thomas Rouillant and Morgan Lagraviere crossed the line to take the IMOCA title after nearly 6,700 miles at an average of 15 knots.
There's a time for everyone, and I would say there's a time when it has to come, and here it's come for linked out and Thomas, and it's great because he deserves it.
Linked out, 3 longueurs.
Bravo les gars!
Arrivée de Linked out, vainqueur de la Transat Jacques Vabre en IMOCA.
Je sais pas si c'est la plus belle.
I don't know if it's the best race because I've done 4 Transat with different teams, but it's certainly one of the best because it's shared, because there's a whole team behind it. And that's what drives me and what makes me happy. It's all the sharing that we're going to manage to create around this victory.
C'est tout ce partage qu'on va réussir à créer autour de cette victoire. Donc, voilà, c'est pour ça qu'on
That's why we're doing it. And all that good stuff starts now.
Aussi.
In the early hours of Friday morning, it was Apivia's turn to approach Diamond Rock. Charlie Dallan and Paul Mayat finished second, 20 hours behind the winner.
Il a manqué peut-être deux, trois petits.
We lacked 2 or 3 small ingredients, a touch of success and a touch of speed in certain conditions, but I'm very happy with this second place.
Cette deuxième place, pardon.
Charal crossed the line the following night to complete the podium for the 60-foot monohulls.
Même si à chaque fois qu'on prend un départ,
we always race to win, but you have to be satisfied with the podium, especially when you have great winners like Thomas and Morgan, who did a great job, both in terms of strategy and speed. We tried to optimize what we had as much as possible. We didn't make any mistakes, but they were better than us. So, big congratulations to them.
Donc un grand bravo à eux.
The arrivals in the IMOCA class were so close that it was the 11th placed boat that won the Diamond Rock Trophy. Damien Seguin and Benjamin Dutro's Apicil proved fastest in the time trial, covering the distance in 1 hour and 5 minutes. Marie Taberly, daughter of French sailing legend Eric, finished 14th after 21 days at sea with co-skipper Louis Duc. Their 15-year-old IMOCA had caught fire just before the last Transat in 2019. This time, the boat safely crossed the Atlantic to be met by Martinican Jacqueline Taberly, Eric's widow and Marie's mother, and in the early hours of the morning the boat docked and Marie enjoyed a dip in the warm sea.
You saw the crazy sunrise we had this morning. We were lucky enough to arrive at night. It was beautiful. There were lots of people. It was wonderful to finally see Creole colors on the houses. Pink, orange. It smells like childhood. She talked to me about it during the whole Transat. I spent a lot of my childhood here, so I'm glad to be back. It's cool.
To relax after their arrival and as part of the Transat Jacques Vabre's efforts to promote local heritage, some of the competitors, including Morgan Lagravière, Christopher Pratt and Alain Gauthier, were introduced to traditional Martinique yole sailing by the master of the discipline, Georges-Henri Legere. It was also the moment that the yole was added to the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List. Martinican sailors with disabilities took part in some exhibition sailing around the raceboats. The session was a chance to exchange knowledge and skills. For the Class 40s, the race had been long, with unusually light winds and unseasonal weather patterns. On the approach to the West Indies, the seaweed added to the problems.
C'est la mer des Salgasses.
We're bogged down in sargassum. You know what I mean?
The race is much longer than expected. Tiredness is growing and the heat is becoming a real problem.
So Massa is saying, if you want to become cooler, you have to steer.
In the closing stages of the race, Redmond continued to dominate. Behind her, the tightly bunched pack has grown to 10. Antoine Carpentier is under pressure.
Levé de jour avec un gros.
It's down, and there's a very big cloud. We hope it's not going to affect the breeze any more than it is already. These light airs mean our advantage is going to shrink, just to add a bit more stress, as if we didn't have enough.
On Monday, the 29th of November, Antoine Carpentier and Pablo Santurce del Arco of Spain won the Class 40 Transat Jacques Vabre in 21 days and 22 hours, covering 5,500 miles at an average speed of 10 knots. For Carpentier, it's a third successive victory across two classes.
I've always said a good victory requires effort, and we were under pressure all the way to the end. We could see the Swiss were coming back at us with the wind building behind them. We worried how much that wind would grow.
Second place went to Banque du Le Mans. After 22 days of racing, the Swiss pair of Valentin Gauthier and Simon Costa were just 1 hour and 4 minutes behind the winners.
No, not disappointed at all. We would have taken this before the start. It's a close fleet, with many well-trained and well-prepared sailors. We're very happy to be here in this position.
It was third for Cédric Chateau and Jérémy Millon, who made the podium after a great final week comeback.
We never
expected to make the podium at our first attempt. To have even made the top 10 would have been incredible, but when we found ourselves there, we just kept going. It was a huge blow when our spinnaker ripped, but we kept pushing, gave it our all, and we've done it.
The Class 40 Diamond Rock Trophy went to Luc Berry and Achille Nebu on La Motte, who were fastest, completing the time trial in 1 hour and 8 minutes. The former Croatian downhill skier Vice Kostelic could be proud of his 17th place finish in the Class 40 fleet. There were times he challenged the top 10, especially near the Cape Verde Islands.
So proud. This jersey is only for the special occasions. For me, the goal was top 20, so the goal was reached. But to be top 5 at a certain moment was a surprise for me. Yeah, I'm immensely proud.
Stan Touré and Mathieu Crepel completed their transatlantic race in 23 days and 11 hours. And importantly, the coffee plant arrived safely.
I'm happy. 300 years and the coffee plant is back. It's cool.
Plant's arrival reflected Martinique's 18th century coffee roots. Before sugarcane took over, the island was the cradle of Caribbean coffee production. After having disappeared from the island, coffee has recently returned, with the growing sector now flourishing. After 25 days at sea, Group G2C, La Martinique, crossed the finish line in 34th place. Aboard, alongside Jean-Edouard Criquioche, was co-skipper Eric Barray, the only Martinican sailor in the race.
It's great to see you all here. We thought we'd make a quiet entrance, but not at all. It's really nice to see you all here. It makes us feel good. That's what I like about ocean racing, and in particular the Jacques Vabre, is that it mixes professionals and amateurs like me, and we all find something to enjoy. So it's a really great race. And the welcome in Martinique is a dream. Thank you to everyone.
In 38th position after almost 26 days at sea and 4 days after Antoine Carpentier's victory, Julia and Jean Courtois have finally reached the finish line and the end of their big adventure.
Merci Caroline. On s'attendait pas trop à ces conditions.
En tous les cas, moi j'ai trouvé ça assez dur, mais à la fois magique et...
We didn't really expect the conditions and I found it pretty hard, but at the same time it was magical. We're really happy to have arrived here in Martinique because it hasn't been easy these last 25 days. To be honest, I've never been pushed so far. We cried on board sometimes, but there were good moments too, like when we turned the computer on after 2 days without news to find lots of supportive messages and to see people were following our progress. So a big thank you to everyone because it cheered us up in the hard time.
Et ça nous a vraiment bien remonté le moral dans les moments durs.
C'est un super cru. C'est un cru auquel on croyait.
It's what we had hoped for at the start and the race has delivered. The 2021 edition has turned out to be a vintage Jacques Vabre race.
L'épreuve nous l'a montré, donc c'est vraiment un très très beau cru Jacques Vabre 2021.
Despite the unusual weather for the season, the race lived up to its promise of intensity and high-performance racing. So we'll see you again in 2023 for the next Transat Jacques Vabre race.